Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chris Macpherson Show. They said we couldn't do it, but we've made it to 10 episodes. I don't think it's been through good management, a little bit of good luck, good fortune, and just continuing to turn up. But thank you for continuing to turn up and tune in. We're loving having you on board and loving the feedback we're getting across all of our social media channels. We are now on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter, or X if you're a more modern person than I am. We love it. Get around it. Let us know. We're also on Facebook. You can see all of our content across all of those channels. And, of course, YouTube, our main home, where each of these episodes premieres 6 p.m. every Thursday. Make sure to like, subscribe, and click on the bell. You'll get the notifications when we are popping up on a Thursday night at 6 p.m. as well. We are going to bring you some more of the black and white of sport. No grey opinions here. There'll be plenty of hard-edged thoughts as we get into the sporting landscape, from cricket to football and a little bit of boxing as well. We'll talk about the World Cup bids. We'll talk about a new coach stepping in potentially in the A-Leagues and plenty more. But let's get things started with our friend, the man from the Third Man Up podcast. He's back again, Brody Burrows. We're going to talk some cricket, mates. We'll get into the biffs in a little bit as well. It's good to have you back on board.
Thanks for having me again, Chris, and been a good week in cricket.
It has been. I'm a little bit concerned, mate, about there appears to be some toilet paper hanging on one of your pictures in the background.
Yeah, look, mate, that's a Guernsey from the one grand final they've played in. So until they play in another one, I've got to keep it there. So she might be there for the next 20 years.
I was going to say, it might be your kids sitting into the podcast chair with that in the background yet, mate. But anyway, we'll move on. We'll get to AFL after Christmas. Let's wrap things up for this year with a bit of cricket. And let's go, first of all, the third test. It's looking like it's heading towards a draw thanks to the wonderful Brisbane weather. It's nice that it's not Sydney with the rain for a change. But the good positive out of it is Twin Tons. Your man, you weren't here to celebrate your correct prediction last week, but Travi heads back at it again. 152. He's going to run a ball. I saw a wonderful stat that showed that he's scored more runs than the rest of the Aussie batters combined so far. So he's going well, continuing to put on the runs.
Yeah, look, I sort of said this the other day. I put something up on social media. I don't think there's a better batter to watch across all three formats in the world than Travis Head at the moment. He can play at the top of the order in the white ball format, but the way he's changed the game, I mean, you could have Australia on ropes at 3 for not many, and then a session could pass and all of a sudden you're behind the 8 ball again. So it's just great having someone play for Australia that you just tune in for. Like, as soon as Travis Head strolls to the crease, you sit down and you can't turn away.
It's Adam Gilchrist-esque, isn't it? I mean, he's batting a little bit higher than Gilly used to and probably in a less stacked lineup. But it's that same, Gilly's into bat. Now it's Trav's into bat. And it's phenomenal, especially when you consider where he's come from in terms of, I think he got dropped from the test side 4 times. Then he got COVID, which brought Usman back in. But since then, he's made every post a winner. And I actually listened to him during the week on the Howie games. And he's talking about that very much around, having family. And he's got to that mature point, having a bit of balance with the white ball stuff too, which wasn't a focus for him in his early days. He was very much a red ball cricketer early on. He's had quite a career already for a guy that's still got plenty of time to go. And he does it in an exciting manner.
Yeah, absolutely. You sort of see the way he sort of holds himself, and he comes across as that lovable larrikin. But then when you really tune into what he's saying, he actually is quite an intelligent person and quite an intelligent cricketer. And I love the way he plays the game. I love the way he goes about it. And for me, I think he's a captain in waiting, I think.
Well, that's a piece, isn't it? Like, that intelligence as a cricketer, certainly, we saw that identified early on. It was obviously a South Australian side in quite some trouble when he was appointed as a captain, all of 20, 21 years of age, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so correct. He stepped into a leadership role really early on, and he's matured very much as a cricketer and done very well. Another player, as we move on, that's done very well finally, breaking that drought, and it was quite funny, and we'll talk about the New Zealand test in a little bit later on, but Steve Smith poked his nose in front of one of his contemporaries in Kane Williamson with that 33rd 100 and puts him second on the all-time list for the Aussies. Great to see Smudge get back into some runs. We knew, I think we used this line earlier in the cricket season that, form's temporary, but class is permanent, and he was back to his best. Certainly not as flashy as Travis, but 100 nonetheless.
Yeah, look, when he first came out, I reckon the first ball he faced, he just about run halfway across his stumps, and he had that over-exaggerated movement that we saw when he was at his best, and he got through some tough times. I think it's quite easy to look at his back 50 and sort of think, he really put the foot down, but his first 50, 60 balls, it was just gritty. He survived, he got through it. I think he was 30 off 70 or something, and then he really put the foot down once he reached 50. So it's great as an Australian to see one of our best players back in some sort of form, and let's hope it kickstarts him for the rest of the series.
Yeah, he is hoping, as we said, it looks like as we record that the game's going to trickle towards a draw, barring something sort of magnificent. But something that doesn't trickle is the action and the bowling of our main nemesis, Jasprit Bumrah. Another 6 wickets. He becomes the second Indian bowler to claim 50 wickets in Australian tests. In tests in Australia, I should say, not in Australia. Phenomenal piece when we consider the history of Indian bowling, that he's only the second player after Kapil Dev to do so.
Yeah, he's another person you come to the cricket to watch. I know seeing him in Adelaide, like up close and personal, once you actually take out, there's 5 or 6 little goose steps at the start of his run-up, he's coming off about 8 steps. And we've seen it before. When he actually lets a ball go, he might be bowling 140, but because he's so far ahead of the crease when he actually lets a ball go, it seems to have surprised a lot of our batters. And the Gabba pitch, the Perth pitch, and under lights, I reckon he's picked probably the 3 best pitches in the world he could have, possibly played on. And he's brilliant. Like, I think as an Australian fan, we just have to sit back and just enjoy this. And I'd hate to be an opener with a fully fit Jasprit Bumrah coming in. I think Nathan McSweeney and out of form Aussies, I think they've definitely been stitched up here.
Well, Nathan McSweeney, I believe the record still stands in his 3rd test. So Jasprit Bumrah is the only man to ever get him out. So we could probably say that he's a much better test batsman than his numbers might suggest. But yeah, certainly. And we talked about this off air. Jasprit Bumrah, not just getting, money for jam wickets, he's ripping through our top order, as you said. And I know producer JR is going to want to dig in here because he wants to really dig in and talk about one of the men that Jasprit Bumrah has gotten out.
Look, we need to talk about Mitch Marsh's presence in 2024. Good afternoon, boys. I spoke with Paul about this last week. Like, here we are with Mitch Marsh in the side. He's not the right choice. The 5 runs that he scored, it's not valuable. And I just wanted to go through a couple of things that I think put up more of a fight than Mitch Marsh did. So the first one, Nathan Brown circa 2003. That's fight right there. The second one, so let's just have a quick look here. But Nathan Brown, the infamous slap. The second incident, Mike Tyson versus Jake Paul a few weeks ago.
Brody's favourite.
More of a fight. And then finally, the French. They put up more of a fight than what he did. Like, can we just talk about why is he in the squad?
Look, I think you've managed to offend a whole country there, which I'm all about, which is brilliant. But all hate mail, please address to Jahar Carter on Twitter. We'll tag him in the next episode post so that you can get into his DMs and let him know. I'll leave your battle with them.
Look, I just
Big
wanted to pop
cricket
in
nation, the French.
Look, I just wanted to pop in and sort of say my piece on this. Like, I don't know why Marsh is there, but I'll leave you guys to it again.
Well, to be fair, the French on their cricket, French cricket's a great game. But anyway, look, JR raises a great point and then bailed out and leaving us very much holding a live grenade there, Brody. He does raise a good point. Mitch Marsh, as much as in flight, when he's flowing, doing his best, he is phenomenal to watch. He hasn't been in red ball cricket for a little bit.
No, absolutely not. And when we've got someone like Bo Webster just waiting in the wings, I mean, think of him in this test match right now. Josh Hazlewood's gone down. You're going to have someone of a similar height releasing the ball on a bouncy Gabba pitch. He would be absolutely perfect in these conditions. And we've seen what he can do with the bat. Like, let's be honest. I think he holds a stick better. I think he bowls better. I don't know why he's not in the team. Let's be honest. I mean, maybe Mitch Marsh got bigger buckets in the field, but I think that's the only pro right now.
Well, that's the piece, isn't it? Like, yeah, his saving grace is that phenomenal catch he took. And, we do know that he's really good in the field. And realistically, I would suggest if Cameron Green was fit right now, he would have already been in. We know what he delivers. Marsh could have potentially been a reshuffle up the order if he was in form, but he's not. Unfortunately, Cameron Green out for the entire test summer. So it'll be interesting to see, whether Webster comes in. Do you think Australia makes the brave call? Some people will say it's a bit harsh if we have a win, a draw, and then we go to the MCG and, Webster's brought in for Marsh. But are we saying it's time?
I would be. I said this for the Adelaide test. I wanted Bo Webster in there. And, I mean, you see him in person. We were right down in the fence at Fine League just so we could give Siraj a bit of, a bit of curry on day 3 in Adelaide. And he come onto the field a few times and he is an absolute monster of a man. And they were calling him Big Slug out there. So make that what you will, Big Slug Webster. But I think Bo Webster, he needs to get a crack sooner or later. We don't want to get 2 or 3 years down the line, bring him in, and then all of a sudden he is past his best.
Well, we talk about Cameron Green, right? Like, he's a big man. Bo Webster's actually, I think, 2 centimetres taller again, if you can believe what you find on the internet. So, a big man. He's mobile. He can bat. We know that. He can bowl at a decent clip. And then, again, I just have this absolute soft spot for anyone that can bowl at like a first-class level with some decent pace and spin. And no, Marnus, we're not talking about you.
Andrew Simons levels.
Yeah, Andrew Simons, or the great man, the man of the bright blue hair, who's now the king of Las Vegas, Funky Miller. He's over there running around getting to the ice hockey. I see on social media pretty regularly. But yeah, I think Bo Webster could become another cult hero sort of guy, and also put some runs and wickets on the board. So I'd love to see it. I think I think he would add to the team, and as you say, he'd be very handy right now, and probably getting through a bit more in terms of overs than Mitch Marsh. We know Marsh still not, from all reports, not 100%. I think he's about 98% in terms of it. He's getting through some extras at the moment. The rain probably saving the Aussies with that in the current test in terms of the sustained spells of bowling that are required to cover for Josh Hazlewood, and that, I guess, ties us into the most recent news that Josh Hazlewood will be out for the remainder of the summer, Brody.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty big blow, but I don't think it's as bad as what it could be. I mean, we've got a man waiting in the wings who averages, under 20 in Australian conditions. So Scotty Boland, Boxing Day test. I mean, let's be honest, Josh Hazlewood's just gone and given, I think all of Australia what we really wanted for Christmas.
Well, we all want 6 or 7 again. Build the man a statue. One of my favourite lines from the last couple of years of cricket commentary, and you'd understand this too, Broads, as someone who does a bit of commentary, and obviously it works in this space as we do. Iconic lines of commentary sometimes just hit different, and because the emotion that sits behind it. And I love listening to Howie when he's commentating, and we saw the one the other day when he was up and about, and bear hugging. I think it was Cal Ferguson, and they're all getting around it. But that line or that whole package, as Boland kept taking those wickets at the MCG against the Poms, is absolutely iconic. And the man on, if it might dilute his legacy, but it might also add to it. We know how well he bowls in home conditions there on the MCG, and it looks like he should be an in for the Boxing Day test. I can't see them going to left field and using either of those other inclusions that they brought into the squad. I think they'll just be cover still.
Yeah, I don't think even if he's bowled number 60, every time he comes on to bowl, it's going to tear the absolute house down at the MCG. It tore the house down in Adelaide. I mean, he had the loudest roar, I think, other than Travis Head coming out to bat in his 100 out of the whole test. It was any time Scotty Boland got brought on to bowl, it was just ridiculous. He's quickly become one of Australia's biggest cult figures.
It is quite phenomenal when you see what he's actually like. He's very understated sort of guy. So it's kind of I like that sort of juxtaposition. It's not the guy that's put himself on a pedestal or is the absolute superstar looking for the Warney level adulation. He'd be happy to fly under the radar. So it kind of makes it almost a bit humorous, the following and support that he's got. But he's clearly leaning into it a little.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, kids down there, and there was obviously Bo Webster and Josh Hazlewood came down to final leg at one stage, and there was no kids down there. And then Scotty Boland comes down, and then I reckon about 10 kids come down wanting Scotty Boland's autograph, and they've just completely got rid of Joshy Hazlewood.
Just brushed him. Josh who? Yeah. And that'll be the case for the rest of the summer, although he'll have plenty of time to sign autographs. We wish him all the best with the calf injury. He's had a bit of a rough run, the side strain and now the calf injury. So hopefully he'll be able to get himself sorted, and maybe we'll see him in Sri Lanka in February or late January, which it's scary to think that we'll be playing away tests in just over a month. But that's the test window in terms of Australia. Let's move on to the Big Bash. It's underway, mate. A bit of high-octane flying action, and looking at the first 2 nights of action, you probably could have predicted that the Scorchers and Sixers win games, Melbourne teams lose games. Probably an over, exaggeration of the difference between the two, but it's on par and on script for BBL standard.
When will people learn? At the start of the year, everyone's tipping the Stars and the Renegades to do really well, and then one game in, everyone just jumps off the ship pretty quickly, don't they? It's nothing changes, but how good was it to see Benny Dwarshus absolutely launch a ball into outer space?
Mate, big bad Benny Dwarshus is a man I like getting around. I really enjoyed last night's game. One, it was good to see Tim Seifert get some runs. I was chatting to a mate who I thought was a big cricket fan last night, and then he asked me who Tim Seifert was. I went, I'm not sure you're serious about that, but he was. But then Big Moises getting some runs as well, scoring at a click almost just shy of 200. And then, as you said, Big Benny Dwarsh is just bombing one, which he's very want to do. So good to see a couple of those OGs from the Sixers getting some runs as well, which is nice to see, mate.
Yeah, especially I reckon Marsh has put Marcus would have been listening to a nice little Spotify playlist before, I reckon, from back in his test days. If little reference there, if anyone's seen the YouTube video.
Yeah, well, he loves a bit of Spotify, does the new Stars captain, but it'll be interesting to see. One thing, speaking of the Stars, though, we did see that Glenn Maxwell, a hamstring injury. Blake McDonald's going to join their squad, so it'll be interesting to see. We're still yet to see the other 4 teams in action. So with a little bit of extra knowledge to what I had when I popped on here last week, mate, I fired off and I had the Scorchers, the Thunder, the Sixers, and the Hurricanes, I think, from memory, as my top 4. Producer JR absolutely lynched me for leaving the Heat out as a proud Brisbane man. I'm sure you're going to, mount a case for the Strikers maybe, but who do you see as finishing in the top 4 when we get to the business end of this competition? Yeah,
I think you just got to pencil in the Sixers and the Scorchers every single year. You've got to pencil them in, and they're in my top 4 before the tournament. Just because no matter what squad they seem to roll out, they're always just going to be competitive. I think they're just a really well run, or 2 really well run organisations, and I would have had Brisbane and Adelaide Strikers in. I think Matt Short's leadership for Adelaide. I think he's, especially probably the last 2 or 3 years, he's not just a good player anymore. We've seen his changes. Bowls more than handy off spin, and I think he's been the leading run scorer or in the top 3 for the last 3 or 4 years. So he's my pick to be the leading run scorer again for this year. But yeah, I can't see a Scorchers or a Sixers, either of them not being in the top 4.
Yeah, it's a hard one to see, and obviously we're both a little bit biased, as we're talking about before. As this records, it's a Thunder Sixers matchup happening, and you're a Thunder Strikers matchup happening. And you're a Strikers man, I'm a Thunder man. It's a little bit of bias there, but I think there's certainly a case for them. And I put a line through the 2 Melbourne teams beforehand. I think the Heat for me, though, and I talked about this with producer JR last week. The loss of Brown and Billings is a lot of runs for them to fill in, and so I do wonder where that comes from. Allsop. Again, I don't know enough about him to confidently say he's going to replace those. But again, you've got to be brave to write them off. And, I thought I'd put my proverbials on the line and put a line through them. Why not? We can clip this up later on when, the Stars and the Renegades both fumble their way into the finals or something, and we'll just prove what everyone knows, that our black and white opinions are clearly not right.
Yeah, there's nothing I think anyone except a Victorian enjoys more than seeing Melbourne teams fail. No matter the sport, no matter the code, it's just nothing better than seeing a Victorian other than Scott Boland fail.
Yeah, well, we love Scott Boland. One thing we didn't love, though, in that Stars game was Hilton Cartwright, who's been he's a guy I've very much really enjoyed watching, and he's kind of a guy that I've wanted to see a little bit more out of since he popped up onto the international stage a number of years ago. But just absolutely putting his body on the line as he does. An unfortunate injury. It looks like he to be okay. He's been cleared of serious injury, but this was a bit of a nervous moment. We've had some pretty ordinary things happen in Australian cricket in the last decade or so. So certainly a moment that had your heart in your mouth watching the game, Broads.
Yeah, absolutely. I think diving for a catch, it was stopping a fall. It was an unusual one, wasn't it? The way he landed, it was sort of, he's not knocked out. There's got to be something more serious going on, and I think a lot of people watching it, like you said, had their heart in their mouth for about 20 minutes, and not a lot of updates, really come through early. So I think a lot of people were sort of checking the social feed, just looking for some sort of an update. But glad to hear he is okay, as well as can be obviously at this stage, and hopefully he gets back to full fitness. And when things like this happen, I think getting back and playing sport's more of a secondary option, and getting himself fit again and back healthy. That's the main thing at this stage.
Yeah, he's certainly been a fixture in that Stars side, so we hope that he's back to Melbourne now. And as I think the press release sort of talked about was the fact that once he gets back to Melbourne and gets settled, it's one of those things with concussion. It's such a weird piece, and obviously there was head contact there as well as neck issues. So they'll very much err on the side of caution around it, and we hope to continue to hear that he's doing well and he's on the mend. And as you say, playing cricket very much a superfluous piece, but we do look forward to when we can see him back in either the Stars outfit or playing state cricket in the not too distant future, because he's obviously a very talented member of those squads. So, speaking of talent, the New Zealand cricket side managed to bounce back, and what a way it was to farewell to one of their greats at the end of his Test career, his final Test.
Yep. Some know him as a bowler, others know him as a six-hitting machine, and unfortunately couldn't bring up that milestone in the end. But what a career he's had in all conditions, in all forms, just about. Tim Southee, absolute superstar and a great bloke. He's, whether you're English, whether you're Indian, whether you're Australian, I think everyone just has a soft spot for him. Did well when he came to the Big Bash as well there for a few years, and what a great career for Tim Southee.
Certainly is a great career. He finished with 2 wickets in the final, as you said, couldn't quite clear the fence in his last at bat. But a win for the Kiwis. A nice way for him to go out. They lost the series, obviously, but it was really good to see him go out with a win. Again, I just said, one of the nice guys of cricket. A phenomenal stat I heard today was that he made his debut in the Fleming era of New Zealand cricket, which makes you realise how long he's played. Certainly a really phenomenal career. I think just shy of 400 Test wickets. An absolute mountain of sixes that he's hit, which is phenomenal considering where he bats in the lineup too.
Exactly. He's one of those guys that I think he could come out and the field will be absolutely spread, and he doesn't care. He's going for it either way. And I really miss that as our number 10 and 11s, our number 10 and 11s going out and having a genuine crack. Stuff this blocking business. You might get 2 off, 20 like Nathan Lyon the other day. I miss Nathan Lyon going out and having a crack like Tim Southee does, and I can bring back the genuine number 10 and 11.
Well, speaking of tailenders having a crack, the man who got man of the match in this comprehensive win, and to have a look at it, I think they end up winning by 423 runs, New Zealand. I touched on Kane Williamson before. He got a century in their second innings, 156. But I don't know if you caught this. Mitchell Santner fell just short of dual 50s in this game. He also picked up 7 wickets, but the last ball, and I think it was day one, he's on 44 and just bombs a 6 down the ground and walks off. How do you like it? There's a 50. Thank you for coming. A very deserving player of the match. But how good's that? 1 run short. He got out for 49 in the second innings, going hard, trying to score quick runs. That's a phenomenal effort at number 9, almost getting twin 50s as well as 7 wickets in a game.
He is a very good number 9, though, Mitch Santner. He's made some quality runs and very important runs in tests before. So he has brought the goggles out now, though. His eyesight must be starting to go on him a little bit, batting with the goggles. But I think my favourite part of this test, though, was the final moments of day 3, 640 to get, and Ben Duckett decides to run down the wicket and dance in the second over and get clean bowled. Like, seriously, what are you thinking? I mean, there's Bazball and then there's just Ben, a genuine idiot. Like, come on, mate.
Yeah, that was quite entertaining. It's the Achilles heel of Bazball, if you will. It's like, mate, just take a breath. Just chill. To be fair, I don't think it was going to change the test, but it's it's Glenn Maxwell leaving balls on middle stump stupid, isn't it?
Absolutely, mate.
Again, hats off to Mitchell Santner. Just looking at some of his stats, he's only got 4 Test 50s to his name. He could have had a 5th, and 2 of them would have been in this test. So he does average 26, though, which talks to the fact that he regularly gets 30s and 40s. Yep. But yeah, that's quite phenomenal. 1 century to his name. So again, imagine that if he had have managed to turn 3 50s into 5 in this test. But a run short, and end of the day, as I said, over 100 runs in the test, 7 wickets. It's not bad as a number 9 and a spinner on a deck that was pretty green at the start of the test. So well done New Zealand on another win. It does help Australia's cause as it starts to whittle down those teams in the World Test Championship as well. So we'll continue to watch how that develops. But it's not often we like seeing the Kiwis win, but when it's against the Poms, it's always a good thing, Broads.
Oh, exactly. And I think a nice little, whether it's a 2-1 win or enough so India can still qualify and then we can beat them in the World Test Championship again and Travis Head can go ballistic. I think it's all just shaping up nicely.
Yeah, we'd like to see that. Beating India again, England not making it, they're the sorts of things. Although there is a piece of me that wouldn't mind seeing Australia versus South Africa. We talked about it the other week. Yeah. I think that'd be very exciting at the home of cricket. But there's a little bit to get water under that bridge. Australia's still some work to do as we, as I said, look to most likely draw this game, although they're doing their best to try and pull a victory from the wet weather. We might take a bit of a breather, Broads. We've punched through quite a bit of cricket, and then we might come back with a bit of the biffs, if you don't mind.
Sounds good to me, mate.
We move from the red ball to the heavy red gloves, and we welcome back our man who is all across the biffs from the Third Man Up podcast. As much as he loves fights, he is a lover, not a fighter. Brody Burrows, you're back.
I am, and couldn't have said it better. Couldn't have said it better, mate. Throwing absolute handbags if I get inside that ring.
I mean, that sums up how we are with most of our sport, mate. That's why we're sitting here behind microphones picking it apart. But let's get into a bit of boxing and a bit of UFC, and let's start with what's to come this weekend. And we've got the Usyk versus Fury fight, a bit of a headline event in Saudi Arabia, in Riyadh. They're certainly throwing their money around, as we'll talk about with Lachie Avil later on. They've got the World Cup coming, but in the meantime, they've got a big heavyweight contender fight here. Let's pick it apart from your point of view, Broads. What are we expecting in this one? Is there anything in the undercard, or are we just focusing on that main event, Brody?
Yeah, look, it is a pretty good card if we're fair, but when you've got two heavyweights and big personalities like Usyk and Fury, all eyes is going to be on. It's going to be on this fight, and the big difference between I think their first encounter was all the promos. They're all buddy. They're doing a lot of these videos. They're laughing with each other. They're carrying on, and not really sure how to take it because they both seem like, big, ugly, angry, weird men. So I don't know if I like all this buddy business between the two, mate.
Yeah, it's a weird thing to try and comprehend. I was the same when I was doing a bit of background, to get myself a bit more up to speed with these. So obviously knowing who they both are and the history behind their fight previously. But yeah, it was all, hold hands, sing Kumbaya, let's try and build up the profile and the content. There's none of this usual, when you get the two big ugly men in the room of, posturing and nose to nose and, communicating in caveman speak, if you will. It's, they're very articulate. They're very, warm towards each other. I just hope that there's going to be a switch flicked and then they're just going to be like, it's like when you play footy against your mates, where you're all buddy up until you go out across that white line, or in their case, step inside, inside the ring. And then all of a sudden it's going to be on. That's what I'm hoping for. But it's got to be a hard switch to flick, from this, very cordial, friendly sort of engagement. I hope that we see it, and this isn't just a money grab where they go through the motions, because we've seen enough of that in boxing, for your benefit, this year.
Absolutely not. These are two genuine fighters. Say what you want about Tyson Fury. He is that larger-than-life persona that he loves to play up to. But when he gets inside that ring, I think that's where he gets a lot of people. He plays this, this jolly dickhead, I think you'd probably call in a lot of the press conferences that he has. But then he gets inside the ring and he's so technically profound, and that's where he gets a lot of his opponents. But Usyk is a different beast. He's so serious once he gets inside of that ring. And we saw probably in the first 5 rounds of the first matchup between these two, Fury had his number. He was laughing. He was carrying on. Then the more the fight went on, Usyk just started to get him on the inside. And I think it's going to be, if Fury can keep the distance and work his jab, Fury wins this, and it's just going to piece him apart over 12 rounds. Usyk gets inside, he's going to knock him down, and it's probably going to finish, probably I reckon in that 7 to 10 range, similar to how it did last time. So you'll definitely see Fury keep his distance in the early rounds, I think. But this matchup here is real boxing. This is not a Mike Tyson, Jake Paul money grab. This is two heavyweights, two of the best heavyweights that we've probably seen in the last 5 years.
There's been some interesting claims come out during the week about the fact that, maybe that loss that we saw in May for Fury is a sign that his legs are starting to go. He's starting to fade with age, which is interesting because he's actually a little bit younger than Usyk. But is there any concern there? This rematch, it goes back to Saudi Arabia. You're obviously leaning towards Fury if he can control the distance, but is there any concern for you that he's got the ability to go all the way through?
No, I think right off the big man at your own peril. And we've seen that in heavy, especially with quality heavyweight fighters. How many times has someone been written off for a loss and then they come back 2 or 3 years later as a completely different being? I think Fury's shown time and time again he is a class, and he's so technical. And if his legs, if they do start to go, his ability to be technical and work the jab and just work the distance is something that, I really, really bank. I'll bank on Tyson Fury winning by decision, I think, in this one.
Well, we look forward to it. It's going to be an interesting one. As we said, Fury, just the one loss in his boxing career. He won't want to make it 2. And as we know, Usyk yet to lose, 22-0 coming into this one. So it's going to be an interesting one. Speaking about people and losses, let's move to the Octagon. Colby Covington was in the UFC on ESPN fight, the welterweight main event on Sunday up against Joaquin Buckley. He's lost. I've got a really simple question for you here, Broads. Is Colby Covington done?
He has to be. In the UFC, he absolutely has to be. A persona like Colby Covington, it's so good when he's a quality fighter because you don't want him to win. You get behind him, but then as soon as you start losing fights, the aura goes around you. Like we've seen it time and time again before that soon as these fighters who play the villain, as soon as they start losing consistently, then they're done. And he was a shell of himself, of the fighter that we saw go to the fifth round against Usman. What was that? 2 years ago, he had his jaw broken in the second round. Continued to fight. He's a shell of that fighter. He looked slow. He looked sluggish. He struggled to take him down. As an All-American wrestler, as one of the best wrestlers in the UFC, he should have dominated that fight on the ground. And he did get him down a couple of times, but he could not control it. And if he can't do that, then he's just going to be a punching bag in the UFC.
Well, I think I saw Michael Bisping talking about this in the last sort of 24 hours and saying that he wasn't quick enough, he wasn't strong enough on the ground, he didn't have enough power when they were standing up. If you don't have any of those three things, as you say, you may as well be putting a very large sandbag in the ring for someone's entertainment, a punching bag.
Yeah, and his stand-up game, it's not weak, but he's definitely not a stand up and bang kind of fighter where he could stand back and pick someone apart. He is the wrestler. It's the same as if you took, I was going to use one of the Russian examples, but they just seem to be good at whatever they're doing in the UFC nowadays. So, but yeah, Colby, without his wrestling, he's not UFC quality, and we saw that on the weekend. And I think he's 36 at the moment. He had Hulk Hogan come out. He had one of the best walkouts, and always walkouts are sort of always WWE related. But yeah, I don't think we'll be seeing him in the UFC again.
Yeah, it is unfortunate, as you say. 36 turns 37 in February. So realistically, by the time he'd be ready for the next fight, considering that was stopped by the doctor, this one, he's going to be 37, which is generally, not always, but it's generally the wrong side of the numbers for fighters. That is for sure. Before we wrap up the UFC, we talked the other week in regards to UFC 312 in Sydney. You may need to mortgage a couple of houses to get a ticket based on some of the prices we've seen. We're still working on our media accreditation. We haven't had any response. I don't think we're going to get one either, unfortunately. But the main event has been announced, as has a co-main in the women's. But the main event is going to be a no-love-lost battle. It'll be well worth the price of admission. Dricus du Plessis versus Sean Strickland. These two have gone beyond personal with each other in the broader sphere of the media. This is going to be a wanting to kill each other fight, not just wanting to win the fight.
Yeah, look, Sean Strickland is just a loose cannon, isn't he? And I think that's why, as Australians, I think we got around him last time when he beat Izzy down under, which was a huge upset. But look, last time these two fought, I think probably 80% of the UFC population thought Strickland won. And it was disappointing because that was his proper first title defense. But since then, Dricus has been absolutely unstoppable. And I think he's taken his ability to a complete new level. And Zhang Wei Li, she's been unstoppable in the strawweight division too. So I think we've got two really good main events. But like you said, the press conferences are going to be just as entertaining as the fight itself in the lead up here. I'm so excited. Sean Strickland, hopefully, he doesn't get deported before he fights because who knows what he's going to say. But yeah, I reckon fasten your seatbelts and buckle up.
Yeah, and I noticed too, in the lead up to us recording in the last sort of day or so, they've also announced that it looks like Borshev versus Nolan as well, which for a lightweight bout, I think that'll be pretty exciting as well. So it's shaping up as a really juicy card. Some Australian talent on the in the earlier fights as well. So well worth the price of the PPV, even if you can't afford to mortgage your house and sell a kidney and maybe your firstborn. At the end of the day, maybe you don't like your firstborn that much. I don't know. I don't have children, so I can't really comment. I'd easily lay one off because I don't have one. But it's going to be huge. It'll be a sellout for sure. And this one, the lead up's going to be very exciting in the week or two beforehand. And I think it'll probably split the population, that main event. There'll be lots of people that'll be probably four camps. There'll be people that really want to see Strickland win, people that really want to see du Plessis win, and then there'll be people that really want to see one or the other of them lose and aren't really concerned about actually cheering for someone but against them. So there's some good villain culture to go with this one, mate. That is for sure.
Yeah, and Justin Tarfer also fighting on the card. Hopefully, I think last time he fought, he first round came out swinging, and then it was a typical big man fight. He could barely stand up for round 2 and 3. But him and Jimmy Crute, really excited to see Jimmy Crute back in the octagon as well. Hopefully, he can get his career back on track and start launching up the rankings a little bit.
Yeah, it'd be good to see Tarfer, a former rugby league player. I think he played 20s with the Melbourne Storm from memory. So a nice little, everyone talks about the Volks football career. This one probably a little bit more significant. He was not far away before some injuries stopped him. So we'll wait and see how he goes. It's weird to think that injuries stopped him playing footy and now he's in the octagon. But anyway, whatever works for you, it's going to be huge. We'll undoubtedly dig into it as we lead up to UFC 312 in the new year. But as always, Broads, thank you across our opening 10 episodes for all of your efforts. And we look forward to chatting to you in the new year and getting your contributions on a little bit of a project that we're working on for the break that we'll drop in the next couple of weeks.
Sounds good, mate. Have a Merry Christmas.
Enough on the Biffs. It is now time to move into the round ball action. And as we do with some regularity, we welcome back Mr. Consistent, the man who's here every week for us to dig apart the round ball action. Round Ball Australia's Lachie Avil. Good to have you back, Loch.
Thanks, Chris. Pleasure as always, mate.
Mate, there is a lot to get through this week, so we're going to dig straight into it. And let's start where we love to. The A-League men is close to both of our hearts. There's been some interesting things happening across the weekend. A couple of the stronger teams from the last couple of years in Sydney FC and the Mariners slipping again.
Yeah, look, very different stories obviously there. I think the Mariners, they've had an extremely poor start to the season, as we've been talking about. Coming off 2 wins, though, you kind of just had a little bit of the thought in the back of your mind that maybe they were going to turn it around again, just like they did last season, but pretty comprehensively beat by an Adelaide United side who are proving they've got a bit about them now this year. They're not just a bit of a flash in the pan. I thought this was a very convincing performance from them. And then, Sydney FC on the other end of the spectrum, we're really still expecting them to compete this year. But just in the nature that they go about their football, they put a lot of numbers forward and try to really overload in attacking areas, which exposes them significantly in transitional moments. And Western United took advantage of that on several occasions and managed to squeak out a win in a 7-goal game of football. Terribly exciting as well. So that was a very entertaining game in what was a very long Saturday as well.
It was a big Saturday. There was a lot of goals on a Saturday. There was a lot of goals across the whole weekend, to be fair. You touched on that. Obviously, the 7 goals there in that Sydney and Western United game was the peak of that. But even one of our sides, and they're very close to my heart, is the Newcastle Jets. They managed to find 4 in what I've termed spoon bowl. We talked about it in the lead up. Lots of people have been talking about it that, if someone walked away from this with 3 points, the loser was in a very dire situation. And that's certainly how it appears at Perth at the moment. But is this a case of opportunism from the Jets, or is it actually a positive uptick for them, do you think?
Nah, to be honest, I think the whole story here is just about Perth Glory being bad. Unfortunately for the Jets, Robbie Stanton came out last week with those comments about bringing the boxing gloves to training. I wonder if he brought them out just a little bit too early, because I don't think the game against Perth Glory is the one where the players really deserve the rev up, right? And now they're going into a bye, so that momentum kind of dissipates anyway. Perth Glory just shocking, man. And yes, it was kind of spoon bowl. If you lose this game, you considered the worst team in the comp at the bottom. For Perth, it's even worse than that. It's like, well, if they can't beat Newcastle Jets at home, then do they even stand a chance of winning a game of football this season? So maybe things change in January. That's the one variable here. We have heard a lot of rumours of potentially some significant amount of players leaving. That obviously leaves some room for other players to come in. Who knows? Depends on what Ross Pellegrino wants to do. He's just had to pay $1 million off his tax bill, so who knows what he's got floating around to spend in the new year. But yeah, really dire straits for the Glory.
Really sucks when the ATO has the wrong mailing address for a while, that's for sure. And that got out of hand really quickly, that one. But it's an interesting piece, as you say. But all those players departing, who in their right mind wants to go into Perth right now?
Yeah, beats me. I've got no idea. I mean, you just look at the way they're playing. Even Adam Taggart, who's a player who, when he returned from overseas to the A-League, he went to Perth because of his love for the city, because of his love of the football club. And you're watching him play right now, week in, week out, and just the look on his face, Chris, it doesn't paint a very pretty picture, right? He's clearly struggling just because He's been in the Socceroos frame the last 12 months as well, and he had an extraordinary season last year. Let's not forget that, in still a struggling Perth side. And as much as you can be an individual and put the team on your back a little bit, and he has to do that as captain to some extent, especially as a striker, you're going to need a good team around you to give you the service. So, who would go to Perth? Someone young who that's their only option to get professional football, probably is your market you're looking at. So not a lot of talented names in that category.
Yeah, it'll be certainly interesting to see who leaves. I know there's a lot of people in the Newcastle Jets fan base that would love to steal their captain back to Newcastle. Adam Taggart had maybe solve, not that they had them on the weekend, but some of those goal-scoring woes that they've had in recent weeks, that's for sure. But let's move on from Perth and we'll head towards the middle of the continent. Adelaide, you touched on them before. They now sit second on the A-League's ladder. Are Adelaide the real deal? There's been a lot of question marks, a lot of talk about who they've managed to play, but we're now almost a third of the way into the season. This round will mark a third of the season that comes ahead of us. Are Adelaide the real deal? Are they a genuine contender for this title?
Yeah, I think they are. I was actually a little bit taken aback when you said we're already a third of the way through the season. It seems to have gone quite quickly. But yes, I think they are. And I was one of those people that was quite critical of them because they've had a lot of close games, a lot of opportunities where they could have put teams to bed, but they didn't take those opportunities. Colby mentioned this after the game as well. This was one against the Mariners where they were deadly, where they were 2-0 up and they were still pushing and they were still creating really good chances and then putting them away as well. So I think that was a really good opportunity for them to really prove that case that they are real. And I think they passed that with flying colours. So, they've established a pretty good buffer up there in second, of course, still yet to drop, still yet to lose a game, just like Auckland. So you obviously couldn't have asked for a better start. I think it's their best start in the league in over a decade. So very impressive for the Reds. And things definitely looking up for them.
Two very good starts for both of those sides at the top of the ladder. We talked about Perth before. Two sides, I questioned you earlier in the year as to who was going to be the last team to chalk a win. And I actually marked this game, Lachie. I said, is Brisbane versus Perth what I'm now calling Spoon Bowl Mark 2? We had Spoon Bowl Mark 1 last week. Surely Brisbane go into this as very short favourites to finally break their duck.
Yeah, and that's just, emphasising the complete absurdity of the situation these teams are in, where Brisbane hasn't won a game, yet we're looking at their fixture on the weekend and considering them such short favourites for, an A-League game. It's a bit crazy, but surely Brisbane have to get it done. They've had a lot of bright sparks, to be fair, like in this game, the one that they drew against the Wanderers, Thomas Waddingham, obviously, Lucas Harrington, the tall central defender, that's been a little bit busy over the last month doing his HSC exams. So he's finally coming into the team and looked quite good in central defence. So there are bits of positivity there where it's really hard to find any for Perth. So you'd think that the Brisbane Roar surely would have to get it done.
They are the shortest priced favourite of this weekend when we look at, utilising the betting markets as the percentage chance, which is phenomenal to think when, as you said, Lachie, they haven't won in 7 attempts so far this season. It's an interesting piece. There's a lot to pull apart in other games as well. We touched on Adelaide before, though. Adelaide versus Sydney. Sydney surely desperate at this point, finding themselves in an unfamiliar spot just outside the top 6. But again, you'd have to think Adelaide would fancy their chances at home. Cooper Stadium on a Friday night is not an easy place to visit.
No, it's not at all. And, I was talking about Sydney SC's weaknesses in terms of those transitional moments. Adelaide are one of the teams that are going to absolutely eat you alive in that phase of the play. So they've been scoring at a rate of knots to kick off the campaign. I believe up until this point, in terms of like goals per 90 minutes or whatever, they're the highest any A-League team in the men's competition has ever been. So they're scoring goals for fun. Sydney FC are leaving gaps for fun. That equals a lot of goals. And that's my prediction for Friday night. Whether Sydney can then score enough on the other side is anyone's guess. But 4 or 5 is definitely on the menu, I reckon.
Yeah, we have to think Uffy's playing the game of we'll score more than we'll let in, but it's not really playing out that way at the moment. Before we get to talking about the Melbourne derby, there's something I want to touch on. We've talked scheduling quite a bit over the opening 9 weeks of this show. The Newcastle Jets head into round 9. They have a nice little break now, as you touched on before, Lachie, into Christmas. This is their second bye in 9 rounds. We've got a 13-team competition. Is that an unfair disparity, either in their favour or against them, or is it just the nature of how scheduling has to work? 7 games between buys is, a fair measure of where it needs to pan out.
Yeah, Look, it is really unfortunate for Newcastle, especially when you look at the run of results there. They've had 2 wins, and both of the buys are coming after those wins. So it's really halting their momentum, which does hurt. But in terms of the scheduling, it's never going to be equitable. It just never is. We've got it's not a home and away league. We've got teams playing other teams 3 times compared to 2. The A-League has always had a compromised schedule. The final system is supposed to kind of just cut those off a little bit and give a reset. So, the big prize at the end of the season isn't determined as much by the significance of the fixturing. So, yeah, it sucks for the Newcastle Jets, but, stadium availability, other events, and trying to plan all these things around each other is all very tricky. So I'm not sure what much could have been done about it, really.
Yeah, I think it's probably just a tough pill for a lot of Newcastle Jets fans. I know it's been a conversation in a lot of their supporter groups around the fact that not only are they into their second bye, they only get 2 home games before Christmas as well. Again, they did have a 3rd home game with an asterisk next to it in that Unite round, but it is a frustrating piece, as you say. I think we give the APL a pass because they've built a pretty solid schedule. And again, on that note, we've talked about their drip feeding of derbies throughout the season. They drip feed us another one this weekend. It's the traditional Melbourne Christmas derby. Victory, the home side this time around. And again, Victory probably heading as favourites, although there's going to be an asterisk on that, which we'll talk about post breaking down the game.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty big asterisk to not mention right off the top. I think, Melbourne Victory, the benefit that they have is that they have a very consistent team. And they have some depth pieces that can come in, but when those pieces do come in, it never really shifts the way they play. They've got lots of like-for-like profiles that they can move around to ensure that their game plan is very consistent week to week. So regardless of the instructions that they'll be getting, or who those instructions are coming from more rather, I don't think it'll have too many short-term effects, which still for me gives Victory the edge in this one. City have looked good. I thought they were good against Auckland as well. Obviously a little bit of, crazy peak A-League moments to finish that game off. But on the balance of play, a draw was probably fair, which reflects quite good for Melbourne City. They're sitting up in 4th at the moment as well. So what it's done is that run of City form has really built this game up as to where the first derby in the season probably was still leaning pretty heavily towards Victory. This one looking a little bit more even will be good for the punters as well. I think around about 20,000 tickets have already been sold in terms of membership allocation as well. So hopefully it can get towards a sellout when we see a packed out Amy Park for this one. Would be really cool.
It would be good. We like to see a big crowd pull out for these derbies. Hopefully a well-behaved one. We were talking just off air that we are 2 years on from the drama of the most infamous of Melbourne derbies. Speaking of drama, though, Lachie, there is big drama in that Melbourne Victory camp because Patrick Kisnorbo has announced only hours before we're recording this that he's going to be departing Melbourne Victory, expected to head to Japan to head into the J1 League as an assistant coach.
Yeah, really, really surprising. And there's only been a couple of rumours. I wouldn't say with too much certainty exactly where he's going just yet. But to leave Melbourne Victory after 7 games, and the quotes out of the Melbourne Victory press release were very clear that their understanding of the situation was that Patrick Kisnorbo would be at the football club for a fairly decent amount of time, and those expectations obviously won't be met now. It's tough. I'm sure City fans are absolutely laughing because they've sent the spy over to enemy territory, and he's putting on a good face, and he's gotten them a couple of wins, and then he's thrown them a massive curveball on the eve of Derby week. So I'm sure they're having a good time watching this. Melbourne Victory fans, I'm sure, will be just as annoyed, if not maybe more annoyed, as when he signed in the first place to come in. That a lot of people are probably just starting to look past that City link and say, okay, you're here now, you're doing well, we're going to give you the benefit of the doubt, and then all of a sudden he's out the door again. So if it is true that he's going for an assistant role, that makes it even crazier for me. We were thinking back to Ross Aloisi last year with Brisbane Roar going to Shanghai Port. In retrospect, that makes a little bit more sense because we've learnt a little bit more about what's going on behind the scenes at Brisbane Roar. Maybe it wasn't the most conducive environment to, successful sport at the elite level. But Melbourne Victory, they've got a stacked squad. They've almost got a guaranteed top 4 finish this season to have a good run at finals. So for Kisnorbo to give that up, it must be a very good opportunity. He must be very convinced about the opportunities that he's being provided started wherever he's going. And now it just leaves a massive open door as to who comes in next. And there'll be a lot of names on the list that were, in the same vein as being considered when Patrick Kisnorbo was being considered. So it's going to be really interesting to see who they go with.
It certainly will. There's never a good time for these things to happen. Right on the doorstep of the Christmas Derby, which is an annual tradition for these two sides, is as tough as any. But the man who steps in to the space is Arthur Dials, their assistant manager, a man who's certainly served his time as an assistant and you'd expect might even throw his hat in the ring. Whether Melbourne Victory will go with someone with no head, coaching experience, so to speak, I would probably be surprised. But you feel he's only a matter of time before he possibly gets a gig somewhere else after he spent time Western Sydney as an assistant, over in Xanthi with Tony Popovic, then Newcastle with Arthur Pappas, and now Melbourne with both Popovic and Kisnorbo.
Yeah, potentially. Obviously, the advantage of the interim coach is that you get to have a go with the playing squad, and if he gets a lot of wins, then sure, he'll throw his hat in the ring. I think the context that's important here for Victory is that they are in a window where they have to be competing for silverware this year. There's no time to waste, and bringing in an inexperienced A-League coach is a questionable decision to make in this kind of cycle, of course, in a league that is competitively balanced. So they have an absolutely stacked squad relative to whatever coaches are used to coming into. Usually a coach has been sacked and you're walking into a bad situation. Victory are arguably in an even better situation than they were at the start of the season because they already have some of those points on the board. So whoever comes in, they have to have A-League experience for me, or something higher than that. The names of, Graham Arnold, we talked a little bit about as a potential option. He is an A-League winning coach that is up for grabs at the moment. Ross Aloisi, I know only has a little bit of A-League experience, but he was very impressive. Is a stable platform like Victory enough to draw him back to the A-League. Mark Milligan has been an assistant at Adelaide for a little while now. Is that enough experience for Victory to trust them? Apart from that, there's not too many options. So it's going to be really interesting to see. They don't have to rush this decision because, as I said, I think their playing base is stable enough where they can keep getting results and putting good performances without Patrick Kisnorbo there. But eventually they're going to have to get someone in permanently because they want to win a title this season and they need a little bit of a runway before finals to do that.
It will certainly be an interesting, pathway here. And the good news, though, for Melbourne Victory is it's at a point in the season where they can take a few weeks and not leave themselves, too late in the season to appoint someone. So from that point of view, Patrick Kisnorbo's probably done them a little bit of a favour. They can start to have that conversation with someone as they head towards that January transfer window and get things moving, which is as positive as it can be when a coach is departing your team. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, I wonder how much notice they got of this as well. It must have happened quite quickly, but I wonder what the board is feeling because 7 games of the season, it's just their clear expectation was that he was going to be there a little while. So he's really put the hat in the ringer of what was really looking like a very stable season for Melbourne Victory, which they haven't really had in a few years. So massive curveball, and it's going to be interesting to see what comes of it.
It certainly is, Lachie. It's obviously fresh. Can we draw you into a long shot of speculation that we can use as great clippable, stuff when it's right or wrong?
Who's going to get the Victory gig?
Yeah, why not? Let's take a shot from distance.
Interesting. I think Mark Milligan. That's my pick.
You've taken the words right out of my mouth. I was looking at Milligan as well. He's at a loose end. I thought if Melbourne Victory wanted to make a really bold statement, they could try and make a very big financial play for Nick Montgomery, but I don't think he'll be coming back from Tottenham anytime soon. No. But I think Mark Milligan seems the obvious choice. Probably at odds with your comment about needing A-League manager experience, but certainly knows the game, knows the club, everything else DNA-wise, and Melbourne Victory do talk about that a lot, which was why it was shocking when Kisnorbo did get appointed. Makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you said the time. You talked about the time before. The funny thing is, a bunch of Australian coaches are getting announced in Japan at the moment. I believe Ben Khan's gone to J2. Arthur Pappas is going to be announced for Cerezo Osaka in the coming hours, if not days. John Hutchinson, I believe, also has just left Yokohama F. Marinos, but he's being tied up in a J2 team. Peter Kolomoski is even going to the Malaysian national team. So there's so many of these Australian managers that have just picked up gigs. The timing is probably even more brutal.
One last question before we move on to some women's football. Is there any chance they go back to the well with any of their former managers who might be floating around Australian systems? I know Ernie Merrick's a very advanced in terms of age, but he's one that popped his head up that's still floating around the Football Australia development systems.
Yes, well, supposedly Ernie Merrick, the chief football officer, is supposed to be revolutionising our youth development in Australia. So I'm kind of keen to see what he can come up with in that department before he thinks about a return to head coaching.
Well, we'll wait and see what it delivers. Undoubtedly, there'll be lots more names thrown up, some left field, some right field, some on the money and some miles away. But in the meantime, we have a big weekend of football. And as you said, it'll be headlined by that Melbourne derby. Well, the Women's A-League continues to roll on as well. And there were some very interesting results across the weekend, Lachie. Probably most notably, the Newcastle Jets losing their goalkeeper again. And we'll get into Danielle Kersniak shortly after we have a look at how they ended up sealing 3 points. But coming from 10 players and 1 goal down in the first half to winning 2-1 late in the game. And this was the goal that sealed it, led by a free kick taken by Matilda Natasha Pryor. As you can see here, they're setting up for a free kick from essentially halfway. Pryor lofts it into the box. And Lauren Allen, that's as good a finish as you'll see on the move, on the volley, in stoppage time. As you can see, they're 4 and a bit minutes into stoppage time to win a game away from home against one of the, well, on paper, one of the teams that should be at the top of the ladder.
Yeah, should be, but isn't, remarkably. That free kick is so insane because she almost makes an NFL turn, right? She goes out wide and then she's almost coming back toward the ball by the time she hits it. A strange set piece. I'm not sure if that's quite how they drew it up, but absolutely remarkable, to come back in a situation like that and beat the reigning champs. That's a kind of a away day that you speak about for years on end.
Yeah, it's certainly something. I was talking about this on radio earlier in the week. It brought back memories of when the Jets had Roy O'Donovan sent off against Sydney again at home and come back and won again against Sydney. It's that big rivalry. It's a number of years ago, but it's such a big thing for Newcastle to beat Sydney, to do so from a player down and a goal down. They had 2 goals that, you've got to feel for the Sydney keeper both times. She was caught by balls angling and then volleying back the other way for Newcastle. Devon Jackson with the first in the 86th minute as well. So Newcastle, we know that they're actually, we talked about their men's side probably surprisingly winning. We know that their women's side is actually a genuine fringe finals team. We saw that last year and they're performing at that level again. So probably not that surprising. The more surprising piece that they did it with 10 players, and we'll dig into that now, but they did it against Sydney, who, as you said, the expectations should be a little bit higher for. But is there something that Ryan Campbell and his team need to look at? That's the second time that Danielle Kersniak's been red carded for an incident well outside of her box. Yeah, she's also I was going to say she also had a yellow card last game, and remembering this is only about her 4th game this season, she's had 2 red cards. She had a yellow card last time for carrying it outside of her box as well.
Yeah, I think this one is slightly more respectable than the last one. The last one, for those who don't remember, just essentially a completely regular goalkeeping action, except it was 20 metres outside her box and just completely handballs it. It's just... It was a bit of a Twilight Zone kind of red card that you just kind of don't know what you're watching. So, look, this one is a much more of a genuine attempt at the ball. She just gets it wrong. Keepers are going to do that, especially young keepers at certain points. Yes, obviously you need a keeper that's going to stay on the pitch and be reliable. Do they have many other options? You're probably a better place to answer that. But, it's you either have to make the decision to back the keeper and just accept that, a young keeper, their errors are going to be much more impactful than the field players are, or you got to bring back some experience and just take the punt of not trying to develop those young players, which hurts you down the road. So it's never an easy choice, but yeah, 2 red cards this early in the season is never good.
Certainly something needs to be worked on, whether it is that structure of the sweeper keeper that they do like to play, the high keeper coming out, or whether it is the actual personnel and undoubtedly they'll go to Tiana Robertson for their next game. She's done a good job. The big knock on Tiana, obviously, is that she's one of the smallest players in the A-Leagues, not just smallest goalkeepers, springy nonetheless. And I have made the comment to a number of people that have doubted her when she's been playing for the Jets at different points over the last few years, that if she was, in fact, the standard build of a goalkeeper, that we would more than likely see her playing basketball with that sort of leaping ability that she's got. So maybe the WNBL might still come calling for Tiana Robertson, but undoubtedly Ryan Campbell will bring her in. And we heard him say early in the season there wasn't a lot that separated the two of them, but continuous red cards are going to make it hard for Danielle Kersniak to continue to find her way into their side. In other games across the weekend, the Wanderers, we know that they went 7 hours without a goal after that 2-2 draw in the opening round. Have they just been banking them up, Lachie? What happened here? This was a little left field. I think people thought Western United were going to be in for a cakewalk against the Wanderers, and instead they leaked 5.
Yeah, well, I mean, at the very least, I think Sienna Silvestre was building them up. 3 goals in, I think, 17 minutes, was it? 17-minute hat-trick is quite incredible. And it just, the dub does crazy things. And we know that A-League has these kind of moments, but particularly the dub, it's like, well, what do you want? You've got Western United, who have been a pretty good side since they came into the league. I know they've struggled a little bit so far with consistency this year, but even just against the Wanderers, we're sitting rock bottom with 1 point to their name, and all of a sudden you get the Wanderers coming out 5-1 winners. It's an incredibly hard league to predict at times, and this is one of the best examples of it.
The bizarre thing is, had the Wanderers scored another goal, they would have actually leapfrogged Sydney on goals for because of the goal difference structure and the separators that determine rankings. And Sydney FC would have been sitting last, which would have been phenomenal. But they're essentially equally last right now, which is a bizarre thing to consider. It's a weird and wonderful ladder. We've got sides there, Perth and Canberra, who showed some really good glimpses on the weekend too. But yeah, certainly, I think I said it in the Round Ball Australia in one of our group chats that if someone had asked you at halftime in the Sydney and Newcastle game that you would have been able to write your own ticket, you would have had thousands of 1,000-to-1 odds about Western Sydney Wanderers to score 5 and Newcastle to win that game. So again, the A-Leagues being the A-Leagues and the A-League dub living up to its name. It's great though. There is, as you can see there's a cluster of teams 4th through to 10th, separated by just 2 competition points. So 1 win right now, depending on the timing of your game, if you're Perth and the likes, or Adelaide, results can very quickly see you rise to, very new heights or drop to very new lows. A couple of results could see Adelaide sitting 8th or 9th by the end of the weekend.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we are still pretty early on in the season, only 6 games in, but it's good to see. Unlike the men's competition, which there are really a few clear standouts, obviously Melbourne City and Brisbane Roar have started this season extremely well as well. But there's not kind of that maybe 4-team pack that's really starting to break away. It is all very even, and that's what we want. We want an even, competitive and balanced league, and that will give us good games. And I think that's a clear example of this.
It certainly is, and we talked in the men's about Spoon Bowl. It's not quite Spoon Bowl when we have a look at it, but as we head into round 7, the Wanderers and Perth, they're both actually bizarrely coming off a win, even though they're sitting 10th and 12th. So it sets up nicely on Friday night at Wanderers Football Park for this one. It's a big trip for Perth, so it'll be an interesting one to, I was going to say get the round started, but it will be the second game of the round.
Yeah, it will be. It's nice to see a little bit of a spread as well. Of course, we're heading into the summer months now, so the fewest amount of 3 and 4 headers on a Saturday where you're playing at 2:00 in the afternoon, the better. Try and get out of the sun a little bit. So yeah, great. Obviously, Perth travelling always makes it difficult for them. So purely for that alone, you probably have the Wanderers coming off 5 goals with the slight edge, but obviously anything can happen. And it's good to see that those games being spread around a little bit.
It certainly is. The other one that catches my eye, and I probably wouldn't have picked this a couple of weeks ago to be a top 6 battle, but we've talked about Brisbane a fair bit. They're sitting second, just 2 losses to their name. But Newcastle, they've clawed their way back into the top 6. This one should be a really good game. We know that Newcastle will draw a really strong crowd at Maitland Sports Ground. Them and Sydney tend to be 2 of the biggest drawing women's sides. This could be a really mouthwatering clash. 2 very good football sides that are in pretty good form over recent weeks, and a couple of Matildas going head-to-head as well, which never hurts.
Yeah, absolutely. And oddly enough, Tamika Yallop has been, the stalwart of Brisbane Roar, that Matilda's name. But increasingly, more often, Sian Fryer is becoming the really exciting, national team name in that Brisbane Roar lineup that people are going to watch. And she's done terrifically well out on the left wing for them. She made a name for herself last season in what was a really struggling Roar side. So now that she's, got a little bit more of a stable base around her, it's really exciting to see her do her stuff. And you're right, the Newcastle Jets definitely one of the most well-supported teams in the dub. They always attract good crowds. So, you're right, definitely building as one of the marquee fixtures of the round as well.
It's certainly going to be an interesting one. Canberra and Melbourne victory, another one. Canberra, they've been quite close with a couple of their results, but not quite getting their results so far. That and Adelaide and Melbourne City shape up for me. Melbourne City haven't lost all year. Adelaide looking to bounce back. They were in some pretty good form until last week. So I think the two Friday night ones will be interesting, certainly to set the tone for the round.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, over the last week or so, the big news of Holly McNamara making her return, it was great. She was doing so well to start the season last year, got her maiden Matilda's call up, and then went down with that ACL that was quite crushing. So, 12, 13 months on from that injury, she made a return. So, really exciting for her. They're obviously going to have to build her minutes up, but any time with her on the pitch is a good one.
Yes, I remember seeing her so distraught in Newcastle after that happened, and it was crushing. It was only the day, I think, after she'd been announced with that Matilda's call-up, and, heartbreaking. So great to see she's overcome quite a lot of adversity, so a really good story, and we love those sorts of stories coming out of the A-Leagues, certainly, and there'll be plenty more of those. So moving back to the men's game, though, Lachie, and the World Cup hosting announcements have been made by FIFA in the last week. They were probably a little controversial, to say the least. 2030, this one wasn't controversial from a political point of view, but it was just very bizarre in terms of how it positioned things. Morocco, Spain and Portugal to host, but it's also the anniversary of the 1930 World Cup, which means that they're going to play one game in Paraguay, one game in Uruguay, one game in Argentina to kick things off, which is just, from an environmental point of view, from a travel time point of view, it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. But it then positioned things for 2034, meaning that had to be, in inverted commas, had to be, if you talk to FIFA, hosted by either AFC or OFC, being Asia and Oceania, which then meant it fell into the lap of Saudi Arabia, which just feels like we're having a repeat of our Qatar dramas from the previous World Cup.
Yeah, and the reality is that, whilst a vote wasn't counted for these, World Cups, whereas there was for Qatar, it was the same process behind the scenes. We all knew exactly where it was going. They didn't even pretend to have a vote. They quite literally, Infantino was telling everyone on the Zoom call how to clap, the official applaud to get these bids through. That was the official mechanism of which they were confirmed, which is quite remarkable. Look, it's obviously quite opaque the way they were doing things here. One of my favourite moments of the kind of presentation, they had a little animation for the 2030 bid where they had some legends of the game. Louis Figo was one of them, and they were kind of this mock game show, right? And they were asking them different questions, and the host asked Louis, something about the 2030 World Cup and enhancing fan experiences, and answer, how are they going to do that? Answer A was, new apps to build up and revolutionize the fan experience. And answer B was new apps to build up and revolutionize the fan experience. And then the segment closed with the line, that's a really good metaphor for the bid. Having two options with the exact same answer and no real choice as to where to go. So it was quite remarkable, the self-referencing in there. And clearly these were only going to go one way. And you're right, the 2030, having games across 3 continents quite literally railroaded 2034 into being in Asia. And we know the story, an hour after they opened the bidding process or moved it forward 3 years to do it concurrently with 2030, within an hour, Saudi Arabia had announced their intention to bid with all their marketing material that I'm sure they ripped together all very quickly. So Australia did try.
They've just got really good graphic designers that are really
got really good ones.
Yeah, I need to get onto them for a bit of the social media content for the Chris Macpherson show, I think.
Absolutely. And Australia was going to try and bid for this World Cup. Partnerships with Indonesia and New Zealand were being explored, and they were explored for those 25 odd days, that window that Australia were given to put forward an expression of interest. But it was made pretty clear that was not going to get up. So Saudi Arabia, the lone ones to contend realistically. But this had been coming for a long, long time. So definitely no surprise when it came out.
In terms of it, it obviously brings up that much thrown about term, and it's very pertinent in the football world with some of the ownership of some of the EPL clubs and some of the other big clubs around sports washing, and there's different views around this, and there's different concepts that structure around it. But at the end of the day, there's certainly got to be some concerns with some of the plans have immediately shown, and the track record that appears to come out of Qatar in terms of what this means for a country that has certainly a very different view on what's acceptable in terms of human rights and human entitlement to large portions of the Western world.
Yeah, look, personally, I take a lot of issue with the term sports washing because I think it's a very simplistic Western view of what's happening here. At the exact same time, Saudi Arabia and Qatar have horrible human rights records, and that is that is fact. I'm not saying otherwise. However, I disagree with the idea that the intent of these nations to come out and get these World Cups is specifically to cover up their actions. In fact, I think it's quite a small portion of what they're thinking about when they go for major events like this. We think about Saudi Arabia, they have this thing they're calling the Vision 2030, which is their plan essentially. I think it was created maybe in the last decade, but by 2030, with a number of initiatives to essentially establish them more on the world stage and establish more political power, more presence in the global communication sphere. So to say that they're bidding for these World Cups to bring people to Saudi Arabia to cover up these human rights offences, I think is incorrect. We all believe, I hope, that sport can be a driver for social change. There were a number of laws changed in Qatar. Whether that actually had any effect is a completely different debate. Saudi Arabia have committed to a number of changes as well. Again, if that actually has any effect, that's a completely separate debate. But I guess what we hope through this poor situation and the blatantly corrupt nature in which they got the World Cup is that positive change can be achieved in some way.
Yeah, I think that's the lens to look at it through. Whilst hosting a World Cup and being in the international spotlight, well, let's be honest, it won't solve all of Saudi Arabia's human rights issues. If we can make small steps, it's the 1 degree of improvement each time. If sport can contribute to that, I think that's more the lens we can focus on this through. I certainly appreciate your view on the sports washing piece too, and tend to agree that whilst it might be an ancillary benefit for some of these countries, it's not the primary reason. But again, I think we need to potentially view this as an opportunity as the remainder of the world to use this event to shine a bit more of a spotlight and make incremental improvements. I don't think we're going to fix it overnight. I don't necessarily agree with it. As you said, the process and the way it's come about, there's clear corruption in that. But if we can, improve through delivering a World Cup as a global game, a minimal small percentage improvement in some of these clear atrocities and issues, well, I think that's a win overall for the people of Saudi Arabia and the world as a whole.
Yeah, look, let's hope so. You and I can't do much more than that and say our piece, but look, it is a little bit of a sad indictment of the way that the world of football is going. Obviously, we lived through the Sepp Blatter era, and at the very least, maybe they pretended a little bit better than what the people in the Infantino era are doing. And is that better or worse? I'm not sure. But look, it's hard because the method in which these things are being conducted is often bad, but there can be, positives, of course. Like you look at the OFC Professional League that we've talked about a little bit. That's a competition that's going to be heavily funded by FIFA and is really going to enhance professional football in our region of the world. So even the Club World Cup, which is probably viewed with a bit of disdain in European circles, is probably a quite good opportunity for teams in Asia and Oceania. So it's really tricky. You got to balance all these things, and I guess that's all I really have to say on it.
Yeah, I think to sum it up, as you use the word opaque, we've summarised football administration, which is always complex and political and lots of things there. And I don't know whether we've got the lesser of evils, the greater of evils, or just still an evil in the way that the game is run. But the reality is the money has to come from somewhere. The last question I've got for you, which kind of takes us on a tangent to wrap this up, is what does a World Cup in 2034 in Saudi Arabia mean for Australia's future hopes of potentially hosting a World Cup? Does that mean we'd have to be 2042 at a minimum?
No, I don't think that is the case. So if you look at, obviously, the rules that allowed them to railroad this World Cup into Saudi Arabia means that confederations can't host the same World Cup in a 12-year period, which on the surface looks bad for Australia, I understand. But if you look to the next World Cup, 2038, it would have to be either North America or Oceania. And in an era of a 48-team World Cup, it is, number one, I don't believe Oceania in its entirety would have enough facilities to host a 48-team World Cup. And if you're looking at North America, I don't believe they could do that without the assistance of the US as well. So if the US are having the 2026 World Cup, do you let them have another World Cup, at least in part, in the same 12-year period? That seems a little bit unfair as well. So if there was some natural semblance of balance, as much as the AFC have had these last two recent World Cups, they're in a very, very different part of the world to what Australia are in, just by the nature of how our confederation works over in the West, and we're sitting over here in the East and a fair bit south as well. So some kind of combination bid maybe from Oceania with Australia to help out, maybe that would be the way forward. I think that is the slight crack in the door that makes it possible. Just looking for a little bit of optimism here. But that's, of course, assuming that these rules around confederation spreading the World Cup around, it's assuming they last until 2038. Those rules existed once and were removed, and Infantino only recently, in terms of football sense, the last decade or so, brought them back. So, the whole rule book could be thrown out and something new written up by the time we get there. Who knows?
Who knows? 2038 is a long time away. The bidding process will be still a number of years away. But yeah, as you say, it could be, maybe a New Zealand and Australia, maybe Australia and our, wonderful government's bid to stave off China some more, throw some money into a couple of Pacific nations to build some stadiums and get a World Cup. Why not?
Why not? Absolutely. It's about time football benefits from something like that. So I'm all for it.
We've heard it here first, Albo. Build a stadium in a couple of Pacific nations, and Lachie you'll get Lockie's vote. So that's all he's worried about. We'll be sweet.
Absolutely. I'll give you some good PR on the Roundball Australia podcast.
We'll plug you till the cows come home. Well, a big thank you as always, Lachie. We've pulled apart quite a lot today. Look forward to chatting a little bit of Roundball again with you in what will be in the new year with our next regular episode coming in a couple of weeks' time. Mate, thank you for being Mr. Consistent, raising the bat to double digits today, 10th appearance, so well done, and we look forward to seeing you for an 11th in January.
Pleasure as always, mate. Can't wait.
As always, make sure if you want to catch up with the football action, check out Roundball Australia's podcast and website. Well, we've survived the double digits. A big thank you to our returning co-hosts and guests, Brody Burrows from the Third Man Up podcast. You can follow him across all social media and get behind what they're doing. They'll be back in full swing in 2025 with all of their AFL content, as he will be back on our show again next year. And Lachie Avil from Roundball Australia covering off on all your football news. Again, Roundball Australia will be in full swing across the Christmas break and into 2025. We'll be taking a little bit of a break over the Christmas in terms of our regular content, but we will have some more content coming for you. Our highlights of 2024 coming at you. We look forward to bringing you that across Christmas and New Year, and we look forward to be back with full episodes in 2025. In the meantime, make sure to stay tuned to our social media channels, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, all there, and of course our YouTube channel where we premiere each and every one of these episodes. Make sure to subscribe, like the video, and hit the bell so that you get your notifications around our shows coming out each and every week as we run into 2025. A big thank you for tuning in. Make sure to stay tuned in 2025 for all of the black and white across the sporting landscape. No grey opinions here.